Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show. Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm absolutely delighted today to have with me Darren Childs, the CEO of UKTV. Darren, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We've got so much to talk about. Again, we were just chatting slightly off the camera or off the listening about what goes on in this industry. It's such a fast-paced and fast-moving industry. But perhaps for our viewers who don't know much about yourself and UKTV, perhaps you can just give us a quick introduction about yourself, if that's okay.
Sure. I'll start with the company first of all. UKTV is a business that's about 18 years old now. We are probably more famous for our channel brands. We've got some big TV brands in the market, Dave being probably one of the most well known because it was so innovative in its time in terms of channel branding and very different to what anyone else was doing in the market. And we've got 9 other channels as well as Dave that vary from archive comedy to lifestyle to entertainment, and the business has been growing quite a lot over the last 5 or 6 years, and we're roughly around about 10% of all commercial television viewing now in the UK, so it's become quite a sizable business. In terms of my own background, I've been here as chief exec for just coming up for 7 years now, and I've seen the business transition and change dramatically during that period of time, as we've had to respond to all the changes that are going on outside in the market, which has actually made it an incredibly interesting place to be. And I think it's best characterized as, we're in the middle of that disruption curve as an industry. We're not at the beginning, we're not at the end. We kind of feels like we're somewhere in the middle of that disruption curve. And so everything that we do as a business is pretty much changing on a day-to-day basis. So, so that's kind of that's the company and kind of, what we're trying to do.
And what about I'm interested to talk about perhaps the changes of moving away from some of the older packaged programming, the Only Fools and Horses of this day, those kind of programs, more to that original content, and how you're seeing that change in the market and how that's changing for UKTV.
Yeah, I think the big change, if you go back and actually not a significantly long period of time, 2010 when Steve Jobs launched the iPad, I mean, little did anyone realise back then, you're talking 7 years ago, little did anyone realise what an impact that would have on our industry in terms of how people could start to consume content in a much more portable and a kind of non-linear way. So, that ability to call content that you wanted to watch when you wanted to watch it and literally not be tied into watching it or sitting in a living room around a television set has changed. It's probably been the biggest change in our industry. And again, that's what's actually made our business fascinating and challenging, is that we've had to adapt ourselves to all of that change, and it's happening incredibly quickly. So what we're seeing right now is a big growth in people wanting to watch content in what we call a non-linear way, so away from a television schedule, particularly with younger audiences who are a little bit more time poor. They've got a lot of interesting things going on in their life. They're much more mobile. They're not necessarily tied to a domestic kind of household setting.
Mm-hmm.
They're much more interested in still watching a lot of television content, but they want to watch it in a slightly different way. With the older demographics, we're still seeing actually a lot of the traditional viewership patterns are still the same. And there's definitely a life stage component to how people are watching television, and we're seeing it. So younger mobile people, much more on demand, much more mobile, much more on devices. When people start settling down and having kids and families, much more back around the television set, much more family viewing, but also now we're starting to see, even with that kind of older cohort, an interest in watching large series in one go. So I think what's happened to the television industry is similar to what happened to the music industry, from when you could actually start picking individual songs rather than having to buy the entire albums. People can now start picking the best content out of a linear schedule and watching all of that as and when they want.
And what do you know? We touched earlier on Facebook launching their OTT offering this year. I think even Snapchat are launching a TV channel this year as well. What do you see as perhaps the challenges in the market, in the industry over the next couple of years?
Yeah, we all of those businesses you just mentioned, and UKTV and all the other TV businesses. Whilst we're in television, actually, what we talk about internally is we're in this attention economy. So people have got certain things they have to do with their lives. They have to eat, they have to sleep, they have to work, and there's a big battle for what they do when all that stuff's done. So what they do with their downtime, what they do with their leisure time. And again, going back 10 years before gaming became a significant part of a lot of people's leisure activity as well. We're not unaccustomed to new entrants coming in trying to get people's attention from us. The promising thing is actually when you look at the amount of time people are still spending watching television, and you go back 10 years, it was about 345 minutes a day is what people were spending watching television. That number's only dropped by 1 minute over the last 10 years. And so what's encouraging with that is that actually people really genuinely love television content. They just want to watch it in a different way. And as long as we can measure it and capture it and monetize it, then that's absolutely fine by us. So fundamentally, TV as a product is in really good health and is doing incredibly well. It's just becoming more fragmented in terms of how it gets distributed.
And you've as you said earlier, you've been with the company leading the company for the last 7 years now. The company probably looks very different from when you walked in on that first day.
Yep.
Can you give us some examples and just share with us some of the key changes and that you've perhaps implemented or your team has implemented, and what you've seen as the benefit to that for the organisation and for your customers?
Yeah, sure. God, so many things have changed. Actually, it's almost unrecognisable from 7 years ago. Just physically, it's unrecognisable. We're in our third office in 7 years. As the business has grown, we've had to constantly keep moving and growing the office space that we need in order to do it. So even just physically, we've changed location 3 times. So that's the easy one. In terms of what it feels to be here, I think that's where we've made the biggest change. It was a very conscious effort on my part and the part of the leadership team in the organisation that the biggest threat to us wasn't necessarily digital. It was actually losing talented people to digital, and we needed to make sure that UKTV as a workplace felt different and attractive to a younger, more mobile, more short-term cohort of staff, and that's where the biggest change has been. So we did some quite innovative stuff in terms of how we get people into the business, how we nurture and grow them, develop them, and train them. As well as actually what it physically feels like to be in this environment. It doesn't feel like a television company, and for a company that's generating £360 million worth of revenue every year with quite a small group of people, you can only do that if you've got incredibly high levels of engagement within everyone that's actually working in the place. So that's where we spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time on culture. We spend a lot of time on development of people, and the thing that drives it all is how I measure my own success as the CEO here is are genuinely people here doing their best work. So there's very much a kind of something in the back of my mind that in 10-15 years time when I'm retired and someone else is running this company, of bumping into people that have worked here and said, when we worked at UKTV with you, that's when we did our best work. So my job is about enabling people to do outstandingly brilliant work, and which is what makes it an incredibly rewarding job to do, but it also makes it a really smart business because people are doing phenomenal work all the time, and that means it's driving our performance. So again, our growth trajectory has been huge financially and across all of our KPIs: share growth, viewership growth, digital download growth, all of those kind of major metrics. And I attribute all of that success to the people that work here.
That's fantastic. And talking about that, I was interested to know about your hot desk environment. I've seen in some organisations they've implemented a hot desk environment, but people will then just drop in and stay within their little areas, and it's almost as if, why are you coming over here today to take my area? How have you overcome that here?
Well, it's interesting actually. So prior to coming here, I'd always run global organisations where we'd have 24 offices or 52 offices around the world, and I'd always kind of accepted that silos existed and put geography down as the kind of main reason. I never expected the Mexico office to talk to the office in Sydney, and so you expect these silos to build. And actually, when I came here, I was quite surprised that actually silos existed even in a UK focused business with half the people we've got right now, and it was really important that where we had centres of excellence, that they were actually bringing everyone else up with them, and that actually wasn't happening because they were, the top performing channels were very much kind of sitting as a group on their own. They became quite tribal in their behaviour. So it was a conscious effort to try and see, one, how we could bring up other people by giving them exposure to the best talent in the business. Two, it was to kind of break down those silos. And even in a small organisation, the third point we were trying to tackle is that people hadn't met each other and they'd been working here for 4 or 5 years. So every 3 months we do a complete restack of the building. It takes us no longer than 15 minutes to do. It usually starts with loud music blaring on a Friday evening we put new seating plans online, and people literally pick up their laptops and they move to a different part of the building. And the message it sends is that and it happens to everyone. So it's not I move, my assistant moves, all the leadership team move. Is that this is our building. There aren't parts of it that are kind of hived off for seniority and other bits and pieces. So everyone is treated identically. It doesn't matter what their level within the organisation is, and you get to sit and meet people in the business that you wouldn't know. And the fundamental driver behind it is around innovation. And I'm a very firm believer that real innovation comes. If you study innovation and you really kind of drill into kind of where did all those big breakthrough ideas come from, you tend to find it's usually 2 quite good ideas coming together and making one outstanding idea. And then, so as a CEO, for me, I wanted to make sure that if we had 2 great ideas, how we could bring them together to make something that was outstanding and that would actually break through and change the business for the better. So actually we deliberately force that interaction with people in the office environment, how they work, how they congregate, the way we bring them together in the morning around certain parts of the building. It's all designed to force people to bounce off each other, because we want them to be sharing ideas with each other, because from that serendipitous conversation the next big breakthrough in our business could happen. So my job is to try and facilitate that. The office desk move is part of it. There's also a whole bunch of other things that we do with the office environment to make it happen, and it's been hugely successful for us.
And where do you see the industry going in the next 2 to 3 years? And where do you believe UKTV will be in that?
Where's the industry going to go? I think, I think fundamentally, and this is a question we ask ourselves pretty much every day, is there something fundamentally wrong with the product that we create as a business? We don't make cars or washing machines, we make television programs. And everything that we see is saying to us that people still love it. People have not fallen out of love with television. The big challenge for us is that the distribution of that television has changed, and so that's an important part of where I see the change over the next 2 to 3 years. And again, as my job as a chief exec is someone told me this very early on in my career. It's kind of, the higher up you get in an organisation, the further out your horizon has to be. So my focus is very much on 2022. I'm running the business now for what we're going to be like in 2022. And when I look at the challenges that we're facing, it's going to be around targeted advertising. It's going to be around data analytics. It's going to be about understanding the end consumer to a degree that we've never done as a broadcast medium or had to. The reason it's called broadcast is always, there's a couple of aerials around the country that broadcast to everybody. I think that's going to change, and I think they're going to be the main changes. I think it's going to be around about the distribution technology and the monetization technology that sits behind the content in order for us to keep making content.
Absolutely. And what we've got quite a wide viewership listening to our podcast. Some of the younger generation will probably wonder, what does a CEO do all day? So I wonder if you could just share a bit of insight in what does a normal day look like for you?
Sure. Look, I would say first thing is never the same thing. And again, it's always a privilege to, when you eventually get the CEO title, it's always a real privilege because part of your job is to be across pretty much everything. So you become very generalist very quickly. So in terms of a normal day for me, it kind of normally starts around about 8 o'clock in the morning. Probably not dissimilar to anyone else, which is trying to kind of gather any insight and information that's come in overnight from around the world. I'm very I've become very good at batch processing information so that I don't sit in front of a computer all day. I will do emails and then that's done until the end of the day, and then I will come back and do them. I've seen too many people in my career just sitting in front of a PC waiting for an email to arrive so they can respond to it, and it's not great productivity, and it's certainly not a great way of producing great creative output. So I tend to kind of batch process kind of emails early in the morning, and then I try and keep as much of my focus as I can outside of the building. I'm a very big believer that the business is happening outside of the building. And in order for us to be responsive to it, we need to be out. So there'll be meetings in the city with the financial community, with the advertising community, with producers that we're trying to sort of bring on board in order to kind of bring great content into the business. I tend to only have 2 standing meetings a week, and I've been very focused in trying to limit the number of meetings in the schedule. And again, that's due to the fact that I'm a firm believer that if I can pick up on something that's exciting and interesting in the business or great ideas that are starting to percolate, I've got the time to actually pick that up and actually make it happen and enable it. So act as an enabler for other people in the organisation rather than being too busy and stuck in routine meetings with people. So again, every day tends to be different. Every month tends to be a little bit different. The business has changed so much and it's grown so much that the things I was focused on 5 or 6 years ago are not the things I'm focused on right now. But again, my only advice to anyone would be to really focus on the things that it's very easy to be very busy managing the drift in an organisation, and a CEO's job is not to manage drift, it's to spend their time on the things that actually are going to be transformational for an organisation, and that takes quite a lot of discipline if people have worked up through the ranks of management. But it's just something to kind of bear in mind is I know that if I went under a bus tomorrow, this organisation would continue to do incredibly well without me. So that's managing drift. So the bit where I can really add value is the things that everyone else is either too busy to think about or are too forward facing. So again, it's just about keeping your eyes up, keeping your horizons out, and focusing on the things that are going to be truly transformational rather than spending a bunch of time micromanaging or second guessing your executives.
Absolutely. And to share with our audience, I'd love to ask you, what was your biggest failure, do you think, in your business career, and what did you learn from that?
Biggest failure. I'm gonna challenge you on it and say it's the wrong question, okay? Because again, failure and innovation are 2 bed partners that basically are sharing the same bed, and there's still a bit of a connotation that it's really bad to fail, and it actually isn't really bad to fail. It's actually really good to fail because it actually means you're trying something that no one's ever done before. So there's a list of things that haven't worked out that we've done here and I've done in previous careers, but I wouldn't characterize them as failures. I'd characterize them as learning opportunities. And as long as you keep focused on what are the takeaways from that failure, it's fine, and shouldn't be things that I see so many organizations where the fear of failure stops them from innovating and trying new things, and you know that they're going to be out of business in 10 years because the people that work there are just fearful of making a mistake. And so what happens is everything defaults to the lowest common denominator, and those breakthrough ideas never surface, and that entrepreneurial spirit gets killed. So we actively encourage people to fail fast here, because we see it's part of their learning and development, and we see it as a real badge of honor, because it means you are trying something that someone hasn't potentially done before. Yeah. So many failures, but I would say I would recharacterize them as many learnings over the times.
and you're dead right, and I'm going to change that question going forward. And if I think to the amount of times that I've failed at things, but as long as I learn from it and quickly try not to make those mistakes again. But for every failure, of course, hopefully there's a success there, or everything.
Look, I think it's fair to say I think most people in the workplace, for the majority of the time, are making it up as they go along, and you don't realize it at the time, but when you enter the workplace, the 50-year-old guy that's running the business, or 50-year-old girl that's running the business, they're still learning and making stuff up as they go along. No one's got all the answers, and if anyone comes in and tells you they've got all the answers, then you're in the wrong organization, because no one's got all the answers to anything anymore. The world is changing so quickly that everyone in the company has to be engaged in innovation and breakthrough thinking. Otherwise, you're going to be redundant in a very short period of time. It's impossible for one person to keep on top of everything that's happening. So you have to enable the whole team to make those decisions and move the business forward at speed.
And what's the best piece of business advice that you've ever been given?
Oh gosh, I've been very lucky actually. I think. Because I had exposure to some pretty senior people very early on in the career. I would say that the best advice is find someone that is willing to mentor you, I think, because you can learn so much. It's interesting, it doesn't happen so much here, but in Germany it's much more formalized, where chief execs will bring in graduates as apprenticeships for that first year to get them fast-tracked through the organisation, because it gives them exposure to things that maybe they wouldn't get for 20 years if they were working their way up. It doesn't happen here in the UK a lot. In fact, we're trialling that right now here to see kind of how that works. But I think you're the kind of sum of the 5 people. You're the average of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with, and I think it's really important that you pick who you work with and where you work. Really importantly, and make sure that when you pitch your ladder up, it's with an organisation that you feel that you want to stay with and that you can develop with and is going to develop you, and have fun along the way, because you're spending a lot of time in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, there's lots of industries that people can work in. What do you see as the main differences, or the things that are attractive to working in the broadcast industry, perhaps compared even with the banking industry or the pharma industry? What do you think are the things that would be of interest to people?
I think it's the variety of things, I think, which make this business interesting. And people that work here, we've got HTML5 coders, show producers, accountants, script writers, there's a whole, engineers, editors, sound mixers. There's just a whole bunch of super talented people all working to make TV happen. And I think the great thing about television, it's a real team sport. It's not great if you're a kind of bit of a loner. It's much better if you enjoy being in teams and working closely with people. I think it's physically impossible for one person to make a television program. It needs a team of people in order to do it. So I think people should look at television from not just from I love television, I want to make television career, They should look at it from, do they want to come and help us build apps and websites and VOD players? There's a big technology stack that supports the building. Engineering's a big part of what we do when we're doing live OBs of boxing matches or whatever. Just the technical expertise that's required to backhaul a signal across London and up to a satellite is fascinating. My background's actually technology, and the technology components of this industry are just staggering. So again, I think there's all different kinds of jobs within television, and if you enjoy working with passionate, smart people, it's a great place to build a career, and it's a huge amount of fun.
Look, we didn't mention it at the start, and I'll mention it now because you've kindly invited us to your Hammersmith HQ. We're actually in your screening room here. Mm-hmm. We just said off the podcast, it's an absolutely fantastic room and a wonderful location for people. My final question for you is about employee engagement. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, how do you keep your employees engaged? And that can be a challenge for a lot of organisations, and I'm just curious how you see that.
It is the single most important thing that I do, quite frankly, is keep people engaged. And again, it stems from a very basic principle of when I first joined here. At the time, we were up, again, half the size in terms of people. But I remember thinking very clearly, if I can get 180 people at the time to give us damn basically about the success of the business in the way that I did, then actually the results could be transformational. And people call it engagement. Again, I call it giving a damn and really caring. We've got the absolute reason why UKTV is so successful right now is because we have one of the most engaged workforces in media, and we spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resource, a lot of thinking, making sure that we have that engaged workforce. There are 1,000 things that make that happen. There literally are 1,000 things, literally from what the environment feels like, to how you compensate them, to how you train them and develop them, to the responsibilities they're given, to how accountable they are, to how they're led, and all those things all matter. There's not one single component to driving engagement. It is a whole body of work but when it works, it can be transformational. And again, I think the winners the winning organizations will be the ones that are paying attention to engagement. If you lose your workforce, you lose the battle. And I'm a strong believer in the old command and control structure, which was built for the Industrial Revolution, is totally defunct for the digital age. And unfortunately, a lot of senior executives have grown up through that command and control structure, and they think that's the way to do it, because that's how they've been trained, and most people learn from their bosses how to do it, and so they replicate what's happened before. And so one of the things we do here is we talk about actively relearning everything we've learned over the last 10, 15, 20 years to make sure that all of our management, leadership, engagement practices are fresh and fit for purpose, and the results for us have been staggering. So, there's a couple of tools that we use. We do a lot of surveys within the organisation. There is nowhere anyone can hide, including me. We do independent surveys where my leadership skills are quantified, sort of anonymously across the whole organisation. Our ability, the clarity over the strategy that we're trying to pursue, how they're being managed and led, how they're being treated, all that stuff is measured and measured and measured again, and we do it in a way which then allows us to deep dive into different parts of the organisation and fix problems very quickly before they become a disengaged workforce. And it literally took us, I'd say, the best part of 2 or 3 years to get that component of the organisation right. Now it pretty much self-disciplines itself, but it is what's contributing to all of our phenomenal results. Is I know that as we're sitting here talking in our basement, there are 300 people upstairs that are passionately working towards making UKTV more successful.
That's amazing. And look, Darren, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been amazing having your insight, and I wish you all the best for the business.
Thank you very much. Great to have you.